last week.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, look at me.
You're not huge on the screen.
Thank
Okay,
God.
okay,
Missy?
Missy, yeah, I guess we can admit her.
There you go.
Missy, can you hear us?
I've gotten over that. But
Is your audio on?
It is on.
Huh.
Not to mention.
Maybe she'll try to zoom in again.
Go down to participants.
So I was like, I can't.
He
do
did
it.
just like that.
Missy, yeah,
He's
so
muted, that's.
muted and, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Join. So she did join. Okay, we're good.
Well,
Are
except-
we muting her or is she muting?
she's,
Do we have to invite her?
She's in, she's joined.
Okay.
unfortunately, she's the only one outside person that's joined.
Well, let's get through the administration.
Missy, if you can hear us, you're muted. And your video is off. Ask to unmute, yeah.
She could put up a chat.
Can you, if you just click on her name, can you unmute her from this end?
I think I can.
I think you can only ask her to unmute yourself.
Probably like me, multitasking. I'll join the meeting and.
Yeah.
I'm in a meeting.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, this has happened before too.
We have to start it, Amy.
Yeah, I think so. Try just disconnecting it. The other, well,
Oh, the screen.
yeah. They're still doing it there.
Think so.
Danielle.
No,
What
it's
do you
even
think of
worse.
using Google Docs for decisions?
I don't think that's in line with where the town is right now.
Is that-
We use share file, SharePoint.
And you're gonna have to start it over.
I think in theory it's not a bad idea, I just don't know if we'll have that.
Yeah,
I hate to go. Our company just switched for.
Well-
And have to use for mobile.
we've had issues with SharePoint too. So. And it's all got to do with security.
So unplug it.
Yeah, let's unplug it.
Probably 10 seconds.
Missy.
Yeah, so admit Missy.
Hello, Missy.
I know, me too.
Where
Hey, folks, can you hear me okay?
we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm driving, so I had to pull over so that I could change the settings. So I'm just gonna leave my camera off so that I'm being safe.
Okay. And seeing as how you're more famous than I thought, I saw you on television last night. I'm gonna ask for your autograph next
Oh,
time.
geez. I do charge for that, you know.
Oh, okay, good. You should have.
So let's call the meeting to order at 6:05 PM. We're still waiting for our guest speaker, but let's get through the administrative stuff. Meeting's called to order. Any adjustments to the agenda?
I can, I guess under other business, I'll just give a quick update on the new FEMA maps.
Okay, perfect. Oh,
Oh,
that'd
great.
be neat.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you have Bridget's question on the agenda? I didn't see the agenda before the meeting. Can we add that?
Sure. Bridget's question.
She wanted to know what we wanted to focus on for the presentation in June.
Okay. I have some insights on that. Okay, so I'll call for an approval to the April 2025 minutes. They're pretty straightforward. I
Yeah.
did post the presentation.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from April.
Second.
And I've read them, but I wasn't
Oh,
here, so
technically
I'll
you
go
weren't
ahead
here.
and just say aye on that.
I
Oh,
need a
we still
second.
need a second.
You can't second. I'll second.
Good, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
You
good.
really
It
can't
passes.
second?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
I don't think I can.
As chair, yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
You technically can, but we don't usually because there's some issues with some people
Yeah.
that didn't like it.
Okay.
So
All right, any public comments? All right, and now for our guest speaker. I haven't seen any, he knows it was on the 21st. I'm confident I didn't send him to the school. So I guess let's jump to other business while we wait for Cliff.
Yeah.
And our other businesses, Andy, why don't you give us an update on the new FEMA maps?
Okay, so let's back up. There was a not particularly helpful web presentation probably 5 or 6 weeks ago. Carl and I attended for the town of North Hero. And they went through a lot of stuff and logistics. That's Cliff. Okay. And then they kind of showed us how to access the maps, and I never could get on to where I could see them. But then Sean Coleman over at the Regional Planning Commission took the maps for Franklin and Grand Isle County and actually specifically he took North Hero and printed it on a big poster size piece of paper, which is downstairs.
Okay.
And so as it stands now, it's only for review by local officials. And our deadline for the local officials to make comments was last Friday. So Carl and I have looked at it. Patty LaBounty from the DRB looked at it, and it was good. It was kind of fortunate that she was around at the time with her background in real estate. So she was able to look at it, have comments. Bottom line is, it's still a 2-year process before they finalize it. There'll be a occasion for public comment at some point in the next few months. And I guess the big takeaway is that the base flood elevation has gone from 102 to 102.3.
Wow.
So
the question I have on that, so is that any property that has that elevation, or are there properties that are
Well,
exempt? Like.
Yeah, yeah, there's at least, and that's one thing Patty found for us, there's at least a dozen properties in North Hero that have received a LOMA, letter of map adjustment,
Mhm.
where it shows their property being in the flood zone, but they've had surveyors come in and certify that the actual house or structure is above the flood zone. My old place on the north end of the island fell into that category. So if you look at the flood map, it may not indicate that, may show a property being in the flood zone. But it still may be the case that the structure itself is above the flood zone.
Okay.
And
So there's, if you have property below 102.4,
Yeah,
the map applies to you. And-
yeah, but I think it only, from what I could see, it only shows the ground levels, it doesn't show the level of the first floor of the house or,
Okay,
so, yeah.
no, cause I'm in one. I remember when we
Yeah.
went through and I saw these documents, I didn't know what
Yeah.
they were, and now I do.
Yeah, and so we all, and there was nothing that jumped out on the map that looked out of line, where they showed the flood zones seemed very reasonable, so. And all of you are public officials. If one of you wanted to look at the map, I'm sure either Corinne or Danielle, if she happened to be in the office, could show it to you.
So what happens, hey, I've been building at 102 and
Well,
now I'm one,
I don't know.
okay.
And that was one of the comments we had. I just wanted to confirm that
Yeah.
that it appeared that it went to 102.4, but asked them to confirm that. But it's still theoretically 2 years out from that taking effect, so.
Okay.
You wouldn't think 4/10 of a foot would make a huge difference, but in a few cases, maybe it does. So that's.
It'll be
where we're at.
interesting to see this. Any other questions for Amy? I think we can answer Bridget's question pretty quick. So if we wanted,
Go ahead, yeah.
we kind of jumped to other business and then
Oh, no worries, yeah.
as you get, going.
Just tell me the Wi-Fi password.
It's around here somewhere. So Bridget's question was the focus of the February or the June meeting. I don't want this to sound wrong. The answer should be she should talk to Josh.
Who's Josh?
So Josh is the project manager at Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, who's managing the LWAP for the Lake Watershed Action Plan. So Friends of Northern Lake Champlain received, I think it's $50,000 from DEC to do a Lake Watershed Action Plan. And Cliff probably can talk more about him than anybody else. And I met with him, pick a number, 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And just kind of as a kickoff to the Watershed Action Plan. And he was all about community engagement and the LWAP should be one of the focuses. So, I mean, I guess we can start there.
Well, she made 3 suggestions, none of which included the LWAP.
Okay.
She suggested Rain Gardens 101, grow native for water quality, and simple fixes for shoreline health.
That all sounds like good subjects. to
The
me.
native plants, I think I mean, I'm just giving my personal
Yeah.
perspective. The native plants is a good thing. Cause we've been planting native plants like crazy on our property. Some of them get a little. We have kind of a deal of 80-20. So you do get a couple exotics every now and then. But. So I mean, I don't know how people feel about.
Yeah, you probably want to admit Cliff, and then you able to.
Right, so now he can
share.
present and share,
Yeah.
so everybody can
Yeah.
see, so that's perfect. Rain gardens, I think are neat.
Mhm.
Simple fixes for shoreline health.
Yeah.
Seems
I
like
think
it's
the
a
ones
little
that.
bit.
Yeah,
I mean, why not all
Property
3?
owners with ease.
And I'd throw the LWAP thing in there, cause I'm just, they work together, so,
Uh-huh.
and he was very adamant about engaging with the town specifically on this.
So simple fixes for shoreline health and LWAP.
Well, I would put if she can fit all 3 in, I would,
So why don't you respond to her email?
no, that's okay.
That would be great.
No, I don't want to. You keep this going. But did you just want one?
Yeah, she wants one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So which one do we like the best?
I like the simple fixes one the best.
Simple
That's just
fixes?
me.
Simple fixes?
Great.
Simple
I
fixes?
think something that could apply to the homeowner easily would be
Yeah.
probably where we wanna go.
Simple fixes and.
And
LWAP.
LWAP.
Yep. There you go. Right. Any other business? All right, Cliff, thank you very much for joining.
Or,
Uh,
sorry, I'm a couple minutes late.
No worries. I was worried I sent you to our old community center.
You did. That's good. Yeah. I was like, this look, it doesn't look like there's anybody in here.
Made just a quick round of introductions.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead. Andy.
okay, Andy Alling, I'm on this committee and also on the planning commission.
Nice to meet you.
Joe Latimer, vice chair of the select board.
You're vice chair now? I haven't been for over a year. No. David Eric, also on the DRB.
Nice to meet you.
And then, you know, Danielle.
And
Yeah.
she-
I'm sorry.
Do you know they're all?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, no, so you got it pretty good. So you got planning commission, you got development review board, you got select board, ZA.
Right,
And
yeah.
Parks and Rec. So I mean, I think you
I've
got a
been
pretty good
criticized in the
presentation.
past for having my back.
Having your back to it.
Okay.
Let me.
And
This.
Good evening,
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
Missy.
Missy Robers. I know you can't see
And we
me.
got,
Yeah, no, I'm
know-
driving, so I'm trying to be safe. So I am on the phone. I'm sorry to have my camera off.
usually there's a full headshot of you on the screen, so we can't forget you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Missy. Drive safe. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share this presentation. I printed out some notes here. I typically like to memorize this, but there's a lot of information here.
Yeah,
So I'm just gonna read off of this, but hello, everybody. My name is Cliff Jenkins. I'm the new-ish water project manager at Northwest Regional Planning Commission. I'm here to talk about clean water projects, what they are, where to get funding, and how to get that funding. Many of you all are probably well aware of what the Northwest Regional Planning Commission is. But if not, we're the regional body, we're the regional planning body for Franklin, Grand Isle counties. Essentially an office in between the state and municipal levels that provides services at a regional scale and are especially adept at helping out in situations where a municipality might not have enough staff capacity to undertake a project alone, or there's certain aspects of a project that they need additional help or expertise with. We're also the clean water service provider for the Missisquoi and Lamoille basins, which is not where we are right now. I'll go more into depth about what a clean water service provider is in a bit, but you just need to know that currently we are in the Northern Lake Champlain Basin 5, which means Chittenden County RPC is your clean water service provider. You might already know this, and I apologize if I'm treading over stuff.
No, this is
but-
all good stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, this is absolutely.
Yeah, we
perfect
don't know
stuff.
that.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
That's
really
good to
valuable.
know. In the case of this presentation, we're gonna talk about how NRPC can help towns like North Hero find water projects, secure the funding for those projects, and then manage that process. So it'd be helpful to kind of start out about, this is the thing I should have just done, but what a clean water project is. And the specifics are going to depend on what funding source you're looking at, but broadly speaking, we're talking about projects funded, tracked, and reported by the Clean Water Initiative Program. This is a large environmental program set up by the state to deal with the total maximum daily load for our purposes in Lake Champlain. In the presentation that I'm giving today, we're going to be talking about non-regulatory projects. The Clean Water Initiative does include some funding sources that are regulatory, and NRPC can also help with those. But for the sake of streamlining information, we're talking about non-regulatory projects primarily coming through the clean water service providers. This means we're not going to be dealing with anything relating to a publicly maintained road or dealing with something like the MS4 permit. When we look at what funding programs are available, I think obviously these first two are going to be the most relevant. That's the Water Quality Restoration Formula Fund and the Water Quality Enhancement Development Design and Implementation Block Grant. Both of these grants are designed for non-regulatory clean water projects that address clean water in Lake Champlain.
There are no dams in.
I was assuming that no one here would be interested in dams.
Yeah, beaver dams.
Beaver dam.
Right. So formula funds, this is the big dog in terms of getting funding for clean water projects. It's established as part of Act 76, which was intended to tackle the state's TMDL phosphorus reduction targets. Again, in this case, we're talking about TMDL of Lake Champlain. Part of this involves setting up what are called clean water service providers, or QUISPs, throughout Vermont. QUISPs are typically housed in a regional planning commission and are responsible for distributing these clean water funds from the state to the applicants of these clean water projects. As I mentioned earlier, the Northwest RPC, where I work, is a QUISP, but we're not your QUISP. We're the QUISP for the Lamoille and Missisquoi basins. The QUISP for Basin 5, where we are right now, is the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. This is something that is a bit confusing, and it took me admittedly longer than I'd like to admit to figure out, but I work at NRPC and my role is to apply to the QUISP to help you get money through the QUISP. Even though I work for NRPC, I'm not affiliated in any way with the QUISP administration end for the basins that we cover.
Are you gonna talk about the WIC?
Yes.
Okay.
The formula funds are concerned with finding projects that reduce the greatest amount of phosphorus for the lowest cost. So say you have like a shoreline erosion project that you want to fund with a formula grant, you're going to bring it forward to the Basin Water Quality Council, which is what Tom just mentioned. The Basin Water Quality Council is a group of 9 members appointed by the QUISP. They're typically people who are coming from other RPCs. They're coming from municipalities, conservation organizations, which is what this graphic is describing right here. So essentially, if you have a project that you want to get funded, you bring it forward to the BWIC, the Basin Water Quality Council, who then votes on it. That vote is primarily determined by phosphorus cost efficiency. And then the QUISP is the body that administers those funds. So the important thing to remember with all of this is having a good kilograms of phosphorus to dollar to cost ratio. There are other considerations that go into it, but that is definitely the greatest. And it's really important to always keep that in the back of your mind if you're trying to get clean water funding. You might see an area that you want to get, you might see a project that you can identify as a clean water project that you want to get funding for, but your concern might not be, you're probably not looking at that and being like, oh, there's a lot of phosphorus going into the water there. You might just want to get the thing repaired and you want to get the state to pay for it. But if that repair reduces phosphorus an acceptable amount, or you can figure out a design which adequately addresses phosphorus, then you can get this funding. So always keep in mind this question of phosphorus reduction.
Cliff, is there like a threshold kilograms?
There is, and I'm blanking on what Chittenden County's is. I can follow up on that
Yeah.
after this.
I know.
Okay, what is?
Okay, so roughly, just to give you a scope, year 1 funds for Basin 5, they roughly spent $500,000 and roughly reduced 40 kilograms of phosphorus. So whatever, that's a little over maybe $11,000-ish. The target average for, again, Basin 5, and I know Basin 6 is different. The target average is about $25,000 per kilogram of phosphorus. And projects are coming in at like 5 to 10, and then you got a couple high ones that aren't as good, but just kind of approaching $40,000 or $50,000. The cap was $50,000. It's been reduced in Basin 5 to $40,000.
This is also a good opportunity to kind of like brand myself and what my role in this is. So if you're bringing a project to the council that you're trying to get funding for, anything past just broad development, like if you have a project that you want to get a design for, then you need to have an estimate of phosphorus reduction and you need to have a cost estimate. And I know that probably most people can't just look at an area and determine how much phosphorus is going into the water. I don't think anyone can do that. So my role, and I can't do that either, but my role is to find people who can do that, find the consultants who have expertise in that area. So you can get these numbers that you can then bring forward to the council that are necessary to get a vote on your project. Like I said, this is the main funding source that,
And Tom, this is what you did over on Pilots Point, but you got someone to fund the assessment, right?
Correct, yeah. The town got funds to evaluate Pilots Road. And we have a Fitzgerald Environmental Associates as the consultant to look at that. They haven't looked at it yet, but we awarded them the contract 4 or 5 select board meetings ago.
And that's to do this assessment that he's talking about.
Correct.
And then once we have that information, that proposal would then go to the quiz.
That is correct.
Then,
yeah.
And I mean, the select board kind of wanted to see how the town could manage this. I think what the town will find out that working with like NRPC might be a little bit more efficient, because you're building the systems and the network and all
Right.
that kind of stuff on how to do it.
With all of this, you're navigating DEC guidance, and it can be very, very confusing, and it can also be just like changing without a lot of notification. So you can think of NRPC as the DEC whisperers. We can figure out these, we can figure out how to navigate these a little bit better, because it's just our full-time jobs to do that.
The forms keep popping up. It's like, hey, I've completed this. Oh, what about this form?
Right.
And you're like, oh, I did this. Oh, now you got to do this form. And it's pretty intense.
I should also mention, while we're here, just enhancement funds. So this is
just to
a
clarify,
oh,
the
go ahead, yeah.
DEC is a state.
DC, yes, the Vermont Department of Environmental
Yeah.
Conservation. I should also mention enhancement funds. This is a much smaller pot of money that is also focused on non-regulatory projects that deal with clean water, but they're not focused on phosphorus reduction efficiency. So the way that I have approached enhancement funds is kind of like a backup if you have a project that is brought to a QUISP or is brought to a BWIC and they determine that the phosphorus reduction ratio is not high enough, or you just get the numbers back from whatever consultant is doing these calculations and you're like, that's not going to pass with the BWIC. In fact, this pot of money, they don't, there's a low likelihood of a project being funded through this if it has a high phosphorus reduction to cost efficiency, because then they'll just tell you to go to the QUISP. I should say that projects have a lower likelihood of approval for the enhancement funds if they are in a watershed covered by a QUISP, like the one we're in right now, but that might by no means disqualifies them. And for our purposes, all this funding is administered through the Mount Escutney Regional Commission. So how can NRPC help? Like, what is our role in this? I've already given you a lot of information about all these funding sources, requirements for them, who administers it, et cetera. This can be incredibly confusing, and I can assure you that the farther you dig into this, the more confusing it gets.
Cliff, can we go back one slide?
Sure.
Sorry. So, like, for example, if there's a erosion that is impacting a road, let's say, but it isn't having a high phosphorus impact, is that the kind of thing that would go to an enhancement fund?
If it no, because it's a road. If we're talking about a public road, then you can't do anything through these two funding sources because it's regulatory. If it was
Prove your point.
And if it's a private road, maybe, but then also there's all these questions of methodology. So again, my role is to interpret all of this. I often don't have the answers right away, but I get paid to look them up. So yeah, I'm here to answer the questions that you have and push these projects towards funding. This involves either identifying an area that you want fixed, or maybe more likely you have an area that you've already found and you want to know if it would qualify for funding, who to get involved, like what kind of consultants should be brought in order to determine whether it can be funded, things like that. A lot of the information to secure formula funds is not necessarily easy to come by. Things like cost and phosphorus reduction estimates, both of which you'll need, require professional expertise. I can offer that, or I can find somebody who has it. Moving a project from identification to implementation requires you to, like Tom was mentioning, you need to be submitting forms at the correct time, and that can be a lot to keep on top of. I'm a project manager, I'm the one ideally who can, be finding out what those forms are, getting them all filled out and then submitting them during the proper time.
So you can do that for a town?
Yes.
And I don't wanna say this wrong, free?
No. I'm trying to think.
Don't say it wrong, Tom.
I don't know how else to ask it.
I'm trying to think. It would depend on. Well, yes, because we could apply for quiz funds that then pay me to do that.
But
And
all
on
this
top of the
upfront-
other work that's like needed to like build out a design, like the project management money is built into the application. So yeah, that's not coming out of the town's pocket.
So what about getting to that point? So we'll talk about it at the end of this, but like, what if we find a project? But we'll go through that scenario and see where you.
Yeah, and once we get into all the
Okay.
the steps for the projects,
Yeah,
like that will be more clear, I hope. So these are the phases for clean water projects. All the terminology around this and the funding sources themselves have been set up by DEC, Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. For every project that's part of this Clean Water Initiative program, must in some way move through these steps. You need a project identified, you need it developed, you need initial and final design and implementation. Each of these phases requires its own funding application and each contains its own unique set of deliverables. So for instance, project development requires the phosphorus reduction efficiency estimate. Final design requires you to know what permits you need, have an operation and maintenance plan in place, et cetera. You
So,
don't.
I'm sorry, let me just make sure I understood
Sure.
what you just said. So if we've identified a project and we want to move into project development,
Mhm.
we have to apply for funding for the next stage.
Yes,
So you don't get funding, you don't get one pot of funding. It's like you have to fund.
yeah, each
stage,
of these requires its own funding.
Right, so presumably there's a number of projects that don't make it through the gateway. That's why you block the funding.
I can try to answer.
Yeah.
There have been some projects that the full funding has been approved subject to milestones.
Yeah.
So there have been implementation projects approved, but at a project development stage, you need to meet this milestone. At initial design, you need to meet this and this, and if you don't, then you, in theory, have to come back to the BWIC
Yeah,
and
it
request.
just seems like a lot of work to have to apply for funding 5 times.
It is and it isn't, because there's some interesting importance to the due diligence that we're finding. A lot of people have been going crazy and like, oh, we're going for final design. And they get approved funding for $50,000 or $100,000. And then, oh, the phosphorus wasn't as big as we thought. And we have to share it with V-Trans, and we have to share it with Ag, and we have to share it with this. And what I'm finding is these steps, you have to do them. Because if you don't, you're gonna end up with, hey, we got all this money, and then it gets taken away. But if you go through the steps, I think the due diligence is.
Right, and when I was mentioning earlier about having deliverables at each step, like it is complicated to keep track of it, but it is also a way to prevent, like Thomas mentioning, like cost inflation. Once you get to a point where like, oh, I actually need way more permitting here. I need to do a whole area situation. Like I understand why they set this up, but it can be cumbersome. But I should mention that you don't necessarily have to take a project and move it through this whole thing because these are discrete phases that you have to apply for. So say you have a project that you get a final design for, you don't have to then implement it through clean water money. You can find a different funding source. You can also bring forward a project at initial design, for instance, but you just have to make sure that you have all of the deliverables listed for the previous steps in order to get that funded. Requirements could be a pain to keep track of. I'm here to do that for you if you so desire. I threw this in right before I left. I was gonna print out this sheet, but I could not figure out a printing situation to get it fitting so you could read it. But DEC has a table called Appendix B of the Clean Water Initiative Program Policy. I can send a link of this to Tom after this and he can distribute it. But it essentially lists every project type that's eligible as well as the deliverables for that type. And the types are separated by like Lake Shore, for instance, like the category of project it is, as well as each of these phases that I just talked about. So it'll be like for lake preliminary design, you can see the milestones there that you'll need in order to get it moving through. You should also keep in mind that this appendix includes projects that are regulatory. So you just need to check the funding program in that column, the second to the left column. And that'll tell you whether you can get it funded through formula, which means the QUISP. Again, if there's a regulatory project that you want help with, we can also do that. It might not be me doing it, but it is possible. So then there's project categories. This is something that I've separated out just for the sake of this presentation. DC has created this list of non-regulatory project types. I've tried to go ahead and separate these into categories that will be most relevant to you and briefly go over the type of work you can do with them. In this graphic, I neglected to include stormwater, but I will be talking about that. Again, each of these categories in that appendix I was just talking about will have all of the project phases that you need for it. So you'll have lakeshore stabilization, preliminary design, final design, project development, all of the required milestones for those pieces.
So we have everything really except dam removal.
Yeah.
Or do we have what you'd consider forest on the islands?
Yeah.
Well. Lots is a town forest.
Okay.
And I'll get in, forestry is kind of weird because it's like a specific DEC program around old logging roads, which I don't know how relevant that is here. But so maybe you can zone out when I get to forestry. This is
We really don't have forests. Does it include old trail beds,
I'm sorry?
rail beds?
No, I don't think so. But that might be, we wait till the end, there might be a little bit I can talk about for there. So this is an important project category, which is just project development. There's no, it's just an all-encompassing project development phase that you can apply for, that you'll have requirements for, but it's a way of trying to determine feasibility for a project, or maybe you have a problem area that you don't know the specific interventions like that you would want to install, but then you can have this project development work done typically by a consultant, and they can tell you, here's some options we have, here's an associated phosphorus reduction and cost efficiency. So this is a very good way of getting those numbers that you'll need to then bring yourself forward to a design at the BWIC. You apply for project development funding like everything through the Clean Water Service Provider, through the Basin Quality Council. See, this stuff gets very confusing. Yeah.
And individuals can apply or only towns can apply?
Not individuals, but not just municipalities. It can be a watershed organization or a natural resource conservation district. The point of the presentations I'm trying to do now are to get in touch with municipalities to go and do this, but.
So our job would be to identify and prioritize potential projects and then come to you and say, these are the projects we'd like to pursue.
Right.
You help us identify which ones have the most significant phosphorus reduction, have the greatest chance of getting.
Right. And that might be like, if it's something very basic, I can even just do a desktop review and be like, I don't even think you should apply for project development here if that doesn't seem reasonable. But yeah, if I'm like, this seems like a good area, I can apply for project development funds as the project manager, or the town can apply directly. It'll just be then that just determines who hires the consultant to come in and do that development work.
But maybe to expand on that, so if there's a private property that we think is a project, that person can apply to the QUISP WIC, but can you apply for a sole owner private?
Yes.
property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been kind of getting the hint that if you can bundle like 4 or 5 properties together, that looks better
mhm.
than just funding an individual.
I think that's probably the case, but I
Okay.
don't think it's as prohibitive if there's a body like a municipality behind it.
Okay.
Okay, so then getting into the meteor.
Wait,
project.
Cliff,
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead. No,
did I?
please.
Did I just hear Tom contradict what we said earlier? An individual can apply?
No, it would be, the applicant would have to be either a municipality
Got
or
it.
a
Or,
environmental
yeah.
organization or the RPC.
Okay.
But I've gotten indications that if NRPC applies for a solely owned property, there's a chance it'll be funded, but it would be better if there may be 4 properties that need shoreline
Grouping.
restoration, and then they group them together
Right.
and manage that project.
So then I'm just gonna go through the different project categories quickly. I'll start with Lakeshore because that might be the most relevant here. If we start from the project development perspective, say you have a piece, if you say you have a group of private properties with observable erosion, you can initiate something called a lake-wise assessment, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. Yeah, it's the property level assessment of Lake Shoreland to identify areas with the highest level of nutrient and sediment pollution. Essentially, this is a tool that DEC develops in order to prioritize areas, and then it will have the recommended best management practices coming out of the Vermont Bioengineering Manual. On a higher scale, you have the Lake Watershed Action Planning, which is taking kind of the same idea but applying it to a watershed scale. There's one of these done recently for Keeler Bay. Out of that comes out a list of prioritized projects and strategies that could then be brought forward for initial design.
And we were just talking, Friends of North Lake Champlain got a Lake Watershed Action Plan for Cary Bay.
Mhm.
So then they're just kicking that off.
Right.
This-
And like,
Are you in that program?
I don't think so.
I don't think NRPC.
No, I'm not, I know for a fact I'm not. And then again, so with anything relating to the preliminary, any design work that you do for lake shores, they have to be BMPs coming out of the Vermont Bioengineering Manual, or you otherwise have to have explicit support from the DEC Lakes and Ponds program. And that's going to be a common theme for a lot of these project categories, is that there's an associated DEC manual that lists the BMPs that are acceptable design practices for these areas.
And I'm sorry, what's a BMP?
Best management practice.
That's gonna be our challenge for the Pilots Road project, because, I think that the town has in their head cement and sturdy and all that, but it has to apply a lot of best management practices, and I think there needs to be a little shift in thinking of, it doesn't have to be big cement blocks.
I'm good.
Type sort of stuff. And then the questions are gonna come up about life and so on and so forth, but that'll be an interesting transition to manage.
Yeah, and, oh, go ahead.
Cliff, if you could just go back.
Mhm.
So, the owner of this house reached out to me and suggested that we actually do a site visit, sponsor a site visit for folks.
In terms of being like, here's what
Yeah.
can be done
exactly.
with the site engineering practice. Yeah, I mean, that would be.
Tom, do you think that's interesting? Is that something we should plan?
Well, so what we've done, you weren't you weren't here yet. So, when we identified the Pilots, if you were there, I apologize, but I don't remember.
No, I think it was right
Dean
before it
came out,
started.
DEC came out, Allison from Lakes and Ponds, Karen, DEC, Dean, plus 3 other people, I can't remember their names, and assessed about 2 or 3 potential projects. The only one that rose to the top for the QUISP funding is the shoreline, but we still don't know yet. We don't have our phosphorus numbers or anything. There's Lake Shore Drive, which I think Dean's still going back and forth of, it could be hazard money, it could be some other funding, it could be, it didn't quite look like it would rise up to a QUISP program.
And I know a lot of the areas around here with the lake shore, it's just that if the erosion is over like a rocky surface, you're just not getting that much phosphorus going into the lake, which means that the numbers aren't going to be great going to the QUISP.
So is this Broad Lake or is this Cary Bay?
Neither, this is inland sea,
Mm.
yeah.
So I'm trying to think of how broad. The LWAP is specific for Cary Bay, but upstream events. So there's a couple ways to handle it. One, we could ask Cliff to come in and take a look at it, and maybe Allison, I don't know how.
What
Allison,
is the objective that you're working from?
you want this property assessed?
I
No.
think what David was saying was for like the select board or other people that may be questioning how to shore up the shorelines. Go for a visit or show and tell, basically.
Exactly.
Oh, is this
How's
one
that
that's
the
been
best
done?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
this is a before and after photograph.
So this project got funded, fully funded,
Yeah.
but it looks like it's a private.
It is,
Oh, I
project.
know this project.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Now I know this project, okay. I'm sorry, your head was
Oh,
in the
no,
way.
no.
And I didn't see the before and after, that's why I was like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
So the
Oh, that'd be
question that I'm putting to the committee is, do we wanna actually do an event where we encourage people from the town to visit sites?
It's not a
This is an
bad idea.
education opportunity.
Yeah, so, I mean, the proposal I was gonna make after this meeting, this is great stuff by the way. Is, I think, because we'll have, Allison. We'll have, Cliff, then we'll have the Lakewise presentation, we'll have the permitting presentation, and then we'll have FNLC. But as a committee, we need to figure out what do we wanna do with all this? Cause the goal is to get projects and to do an event of people coming to look at projects. I'll be critical, and I don't mean to be, 2 years ago or whatever, Andy, NRPC came out and said, hey, North Hero, send us your projects. Nobody knows what a project looks like. Right?
Yeah.
It was a public announcement. Nobody knows what a project looks like. So we need to train people on what to look for. on
Or who to
projects.
talk to
And I
if you're like,
right,
is
think
this
those two pictures are awesome too,
Yeah,
to display it, and maybe that's it, maybe getting more before and after pictures to show people. Cause I mean, if that was my property, you got one that really isn't functionable for nature and one that is functionable for nature, but at the same time, it beautified the property.
Yeah.
And served purpose, so if
So
more
this is
homeowners,
potentially a July event.
right, more homeowners were to see that, then they wouldn't, maybe they would be more apt to try to help out.
Well, and then, okay, if somebody, so we do this and do we just send them to Cliff, or do we as a committee wanna kind of gather projects and then come to you with them? 4 or 5 or something like that.
right?
I mean,
Well, I
those are
think we
things,
have to, what I heard
Yeah,
Cliff say
those are
was
things
is
we
that
should
it's
think
gotta
about.
come from the municipality.
I'm gonna, oh,
keep
no,
going.
no, this is very helpful. I'm just gonna fly through some of these because I don't wanna, take up too much time. There's floodplain restoration. This is about bringing a stream to its least erosive conditions, kind of the same, philosophy as the bioengineered shore. DEC is looking to have, like stability brought in by bringing, a feature to its most natural condition. So in this case, there's also a DEC like evaluation called the stream geomorphic assessment. It's where they come in and determine what the stream's least erosive state would be. And then from there determine the interventions that would be possible. This work can include channel or floodplain modification, removal, retrofit of a river corridor, and floodplain encroachments. Dam removal is not relevant to you all, but that's,
Can you back up one?
yeah.
On the floodplain restoration, would that include, I mean, it's one thing if you're talking about an actual stream, but would it include water runoff? Like rain?
No, I think that would be under the stormwater,
Okay,
project type.
I see.
So if you were to take a look at the Appendix B thing that I was talking about, the list of just all of the project types that DEC has, there are a lot of stormwater ones in there that are not eligible for clean water service provider funding because they are regulatory. So we're looking at just stuff that is non-regulatory. So nothing relating to roads, and also I got to admit, stuff coming off private roads can be complicated as well. like everything else, DEC has a manual, stormwater management manual, the BMPs for addressing stormwater are coming out of that. Yeah,
Do you have a link to that?
I do, and I can send that
Yeah,
after
that'd be
this.
great.
I'll send a link of all of these wonderful DEC guidance documents. But again, it's my job to read those. So if someone's like, can you tell me if this is applicable? I'm happy to do that. There's gully stabilization. I'm gonna admit that gullies have been the bane of my existence recently, in that it's a really good example of how difficult it can be to navigate DEC regulations, because gullies, if you're able to get a gully fixed, if DEC says that this is a gully and you can't address it with clean water service provider money, then there's a very, very high phosphorus reduction per kilogram ratio.
It's like $6,000 per kilogram.
It's crazy,
Really?
yeah.
And it's usually like 20 kilograms, so it's $100,000+ project.
Why?
You're just washing dirt into the lake.
Yeah.
But the issue is that getting DEC to agree that a particular project is a gully restoration is becoming very difficult. For one, they cannot be considered in circumstances where the water is coming off of or they can only be considered in circumstances where water is coming off of a developed surface. It's unclear if they qualify if that developed surface is a public road, because there's a whole other way to credit phosphorus with public roads through the municipal roads general permit. Additionally, if you found a location where gullies formed by linear runoff from a private developed area, you're still required to treat that upstream flow as a separate practice. So if you're thinking about getting a gully project done, you also have to keep in mind that there's a separate stormwater project that has to be done upstream to mitigate that flow, and that the extent to which that stormwater work needs to be done and how much that flow is being addressed is just on a case by case basis with the people who work at DEC. And then, so the issue is that once you have that once you found a project that can be counted as a gully potentially, if you have to then do a stormwater project on top of that, then it really reduces the phosphorus to cost ratio.
This is a great example, because we've had one, it keeps going back and forth because they didn't do the due diligence, in my opinion, right? And they got to a point, and then all of a sudden it needs stormwater, then it reduced the phosphorus, and now there wasn't money for the project, but then they did something else and they got the gully restoration. It's still bouncing back and forth.
Yeah. So gullies making me pull my hair out recently.
But gullies can be a great project.
Yeah, if
you got a gully.
Dean calls them unicorns,
Yeah.
because if you actually get one done, like, it's magical.
And so, Tom, are you on the QUISP committee?
No.
So how are
When
you
you-
familiar with the
When
the
you
applications?
talk about the WIC, or have you already talked about the WIC?
Yeah, I mentioned the.
Okay, so you have the clean water service provider. They're the heavy lifters. They manage all the funds, they manage all the projects, all that kind of stuff. But the way the state set it up is, their guidance, if you will, is the Basin Water Quality Council, which consists of a regional planning commission. So NRPC sits on the Basin Water Quality Council. There's two municipal members that are supposed to support the municipalities. I'm a municipal, whatever. Yeah, and then
You have people from watershed organizations.
watershed organization,
Conservation organization.
so forth. And so I sit on the Basin Water Quality Council. Corinne came out and said, anybody interested? I said, yeah, and I got on. And then they made me chair, which is even a little more difficult, but not bad.
So the BWIC votes on these
Yeah.
projects, and the QUISP is the one who administers them. If there's a situation where the QUISP is like, we can't fund this because we're the people who are financially liable for it, like, that is, like, they.
So where is the WIC on this org chart?
The BWIC is the semicircle surrounding the
Basin
QUISP.
Water Quality Council. Yep.
With representatives from these different.
Yeah,
Got it.
and what can be very confusing is that the RPC on the outside,
Yeah,
the QUISP is also in an RPC. So if we're talking about if we're talking about Basin 5, the one that Tom sits on, the QUISP is Chittenden County RPC, but then the RPC member is us, Northwest Regional Planning Commission. Yes.
There aren't enough hours in the day as a volunteer to organize what is one of the key things I'm finding out. They're just. It's incredible.
Even like getting this presentation together, I'm like, there's so many ways it could go.
Looking to get admitted.
Oh,
Is that correct?
Did we lose you, Missy?
Oh, drove through a dead zone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Missy, are you back?
I'm back. Thank you so much.
Were you waiting a long time? I'm sorry.
No, but I knew you're good at like responding to text. So I'm like, David will let me in.
Yeah, so wetlands, again, we're talking about designing wetland and buffer area restorations to restore the landscape to a stable condition, reduce flood risk, increase water quality, all those great things that we know wetlands can do. Forestry, I'll just go over this very shortly because you guys don't have this, but like, so what DEC is doing, what they're rolling out today, in fact, I was at a training earlier today where they're inventorying logging roads and skid trails, and then prioritizing those areas, and then developing it's an app where you can fill out this information that will evaluate the road segment. You'll say, here's the erosion present, are these proper, are the culverts of proper size, is there proper drainage? If no, you have this segment that's identified on a map that says this segment needs to be fixed. Then you can fix that segment with clean water service provider money because it's a non-regulatory road and you're reducing phosphorus. The thing that they're developing, will calculate how much phosphorus is being reduced when you fix it. That it's more important for me to talk about that because NRPC is developing something right now with private roads that is essentially the same thing. Is anybody here familiar with the municipal roads general permit? Okay, so when I was talking about.
You're joking, right?
No, that's more Tracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I was talking about how roads are not qualified for this type of funding, it's because the phosphorus that is addressed on public roads is addressed through the municipal roads general permit because it is regulatory. So essentially, DC has mapped all hydrologically connected roads. Hydrologically connected roads in Vermont. So all roads where the runoff is going into a water body. They've mapped all of them. Most of them have been.
That includes public and private or just?
It's only public. What I'm
Yeah.
talking about right now is just public. And what happens is those road segments are evaluated every 10 years, I think. And out of that, you get a list of roads that need work done on them. Bringing that road up to code goes towards the TMDL of Lake Champlain. That's how that phosphorus credit is accounted for.
TMDL?
The total maximum daily load.
Got it.
You'd all don't need to know this because you're not dealing with road regulations. But what NRPC is doing right now is trying to adapt that framework to private roads and essentially doing the same thing where we're taking the entire Lake Champlain Basin. This is going to be a multi-year project. We map, we're going to try to map the private roads in it and then prioritize areas that are in need of repair. Once those areas have been prioritized, the same types of organizations that would be applying for QUISP funds can then say, hey, I want to repair this road. Then they can get funded through the QUISP to do that. Right now, there's not a good way to get private road repair funded through the QUISP. Previously, Maddie, who had my job before me, she developed this framework that it was a decision tree that essentially tried to take private roads that would qualify for stormwater funding. But DC she presented it to DC and they're like, no, you can't do that. So this, what we're developing right now is the way that we're hoping that private roads can be addressed. And it's like, we're working with DEC, we're working with Lake Champlain Basin Program. So once it is implemented, it will be possible to do private road repair through it. But that is in the future. I will say there's not a great way to repair private roads with clean water money right now.
No, and that's really important. And I'm gonna leave names out of this. Cause I've got a private road, 2 culverts physically measured, 20 kilograms per year going into the base. Nobody can do anything about it.
Yeah.
Because there's no methodology set up. But you're staring at all this phosphorus going in, measured, and I'm not kidding, I measured it.
How do you measure phosphate?
It's samples. There's a lot of sampling going around. That's another discussion. There's a lot of sampling being done around, Lake Champlain. And so you measure it, and then if based on flow rates and all sorts of things, you can say, well, this is how much phosphorus is going. But it's off a private road and there's no methodology to address it.
Right.
So how do you get sampling done?
We don't do the sampling. We usually hire a consultant to do it.
There are 2 or 3 organizations that are doing sampling. Rosa, Friends of Lake Champlain. They get money from Lake Champlain Basin Program and DEC, and there's another funding. But it might be more broad scope than what you're thinking about. Like if you as a private landowner wanted testing, it's easy to do, but you'd have to pay for it.
Well, that is essentially my presentation. If there are any other questions that people have for me now.
It's a lot of meat.
A lot of me.
No, I mean, we could go on for.
And I guess the main point is that all of this is obviously very confusing. And I want to make myself available as someone who can help you navigate this. Obviously, I have more ability to do that once project is funded by the quiz, because then that is paying me to do that. But I want to be a point person for helping you identify projects that you can fund through the Clean Water.
Why do you
Acquisition
feel
Fund.
like there's so much bureaucracy behind it and it's so complicated? Is it just to ensure that the funding is going to correct problems, or?
I think that, I mean, I think there are a couple reasons, at least from what I can tell, like when we were talking about the different project phases and all the deliverables you need in each one. Like I said, I think that is to like not put somebody in a position where costs are suddenly inflating because there's a bunch of
Right.
stuff that you have to deal with. I know a big problem with developing methodologies is figuring out a way to not double count phosphorus. So for something like it's just that there's this TMDL that's been set, the total maximum daily load, that needs to be addressed. And a lot of the head spinning about this methodology is trying to figure out a way to calculate it accurately, but have it not be incorporating stuff from a different source that's also calculating phosphorus. But
Like we have a great project with the library, but it involves ag, it involves V-Trans, it involves MRGP, and it's a beautiful project. But we don't know what to do with it because there's too many players and we don't know who should or get credit for it. And it's just kind of.
And that's kind of what I'm
fluttering
talking about. is
right now.
Vermont is made up of a bunch of small municipalities. So it's great that you guys can help. But to get the municipalities rolling and actually wanting to get them involved, it just seems like if it wasn't such a complex process. there'd be more
The
people that do like
DEC
that.
is a very complex department, having dealt with them on several different things. It's a big department, a lot of different pieces to
It
it.
just seems counterintuitive, you know, you're trying to clean up the lake and make the lake better, but then the program is just
Yeah.
so.
So let me,
cumbersome.
I'm not sure if I'm defending this or not, but. I actually believe the hardest part of the event is the project identification, project development. It seems like it should be easy, but finding the projects. And hopefully I don't get too philosophical there. I believe NRPC is in a perfect position because they have municipalities on their boards to work with the municipalities, and I think the municipalities are absolutely critical to this process. And I think in a way, we've almost been overlooked. And
No, I mean, we have a funding source. We got a grant through Watersheds United Vermont that we're explicitly using for presentations like these because we need to have a better
Yeah.
relationship with municipalities.
And Danielle, I kind of invited you here specifically, if you need to be in the project identification phase. We have to talk to the ZA, we have to talk to the DRB, we have to talk to all the permitting specialists before we can even go to funding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if it falls in a special flood hazard, we have to get that resolved. And if it looks like it might need a DRB approval, we have to get that resolved. We need all these emails that say, I talked to Danielle, I talked to DRB, I talked to Misha, I talked to, I can't remember her name. Wetlands. Wetlands, and we at least need confirmation that we talked to you and you said, yes, you will or may need a permit for this, or no, you don't, type sort of stuff. So we gotta dot all these i's and cross all these t's. And
I have a big picture question. When you talk about funding, what is the source of the funding? Do you count on federal funding to any extent?
Not with this, it's
Good,
not paid.
that's
Yeah.
because that probably won't be there.
Yeah,
State funding's crunch too.
Yeah, yeah,
but less likelihood that it just disappears.
yeah, right,
Suddenly. No, this has been of a lot of things in our office, this has been one of the safer.
okay.
and to give you, oh, go ahead.
I wonder if you could just comment on, Chittenden County includes Burlington, right?
Mhm.
So what's going on with the, with the sewage?
I couldn't tell you that. I just I work in St. Albans. I mean, I know about what's going on in Burlington sewage just because I live there. You can tell all the road work going on, but I can't comment on what's going on there.
I haven't dug into it enough. If you
Is
look,
this your region? Does this include your region?
yeah, Burlington went,
For the
Basin 5.
Basin 5, yes.
The number shocked me. And I'm not sure I believed it. The phosphorus impact from wastewater is very, very low compared to the big picture.
Really?
I was shocked. I was like, no, this has to be the biggest contributor. Let's just fix it.
Right.
And it really isn't.
We talked about that, Thomas, we realized, you look at your ag
Yeah,
and the runoff, it's everywhere,
yeah.
So.
And is that pie chart available for public consumption?
If I can find it, I'll find it for you. I found it once. I'll see if I can find it again.
I kind of went down that road and started researching Chittenden County's septic systems and sewage plants. Because they haven't built a new one since like 1965.
Yeah.
And before they were doing it with population increases of 10 to 15,000. So we've obviously had more than 10 to 15,000 increase since 1965. So, but once I started going down that road and I talked to Tom and I was like, yeah, man, I bet ag is way far more detrimental than a couple sewage spills here or there. Or even the flooding in the springs, when we have all the flooding come down the rivers and they take out sewage plants and stuff like that. Maybe that adds a lot more because you're getting all the erosion with it.
Yeah.
But.
The
as far as
difference, we're talking about a
Burlington is
wastewater
probably not
treatment plant, that's,
as people think.
that's a point runoff as opposed to widespread
Right.
ag runoffs. And that runoff is being treated.
But Joe, if I'm gonna speak for the select board, but if I'm saying something incorrect, I'm just based on talking to
I'll
you and
jump
Carl
on
and so on and so forth. The town of North Hero wants to do projects and we
Yeah.
want to help with identifying projects and
Absolutely.
the subcommittee. So after this meeting, we're gonna have another meeting and we're gonna try to figure out what to do with all the information that we've received. And how do we go out and find projects?
Right.
And
No, I mean.
we're gonna be talking to you.
Please,
This-
yeah.
This was perfect. This is exactly.
It's great to hear. I'll send you a copy of
But,
that.
and I know there's a lot more information beyond what you presented.
Yeah, big
So
time.
we're gonna be calling you back or talking to you or emailing you or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the whole goal is to find projects. And then, gee, I know you have projects. We just gotta get them organized. We gotta get Cliff to look at them.
They're just not forestry projects.
Would Pilots be considered a forest?
It is considered, it is.
And there's a trail that has erosion and gullies going.
Yep.
Right.
Now,
We definitely
A
have
gully
stormwater problem.
with the examples you showed, doesn't look like it's that complex to repair. Why don't they do it yourself manuals or something along those lines with how to put the riprap or whatever else to put down?
There's a do-it-yourself manual. It's
Is there?
bioengineering.
Yeah, I just, in terms of like,
You just can't find it.
Just can't find it.
And if you found it, it's in our bylaws.
No, Joe, it's in our bylaws, the bioengineering.
Well, not yet. It's, I mean, it's been
Well,
proposed
It's
to
been
be.
proposed to be put.
But NRPC hasn't reviewed it.
Cause I mean, I've seen a lot of homeowners
No,
that put
please.
their own stairs in and they, you know, and I would imagine it does the same thing. If you put a little bit of the right vegetation around it.
I mean, you would have to deal with way less DEC regulation because you wouldn't get it, be having it funded through state money. And I think they'd be like, yeah, by all means.
Just a little bit about the funding sources and the logistics for it.
Sure.
Since you have to apply for each one of those phases,
Mhm.
are there application windows like they often do with grants?
Yeah, there are.
So.
And that's
it
posted
is
on the
a
NRPC.
Thing,
Well, the WISP is every month.
Yeah,
every month, so. you
Every-
could-
well, no,
you finish
yeah,
the
yeah,
term.
because you're on, sorry, I'm thinking about the 1 point.
Basin 5 is every month.
Yeah,
Okay, second question, is there a limit on funding, a cycle window? In other words, do you get so much per year to use, and so you run out in July and you're done, or,
So let me tell you where we are.
okay?
So the Basin 5 WISP has spent 500,000, I'm gonna use about, because I don't, about $500,000
Mhm.
and impacted 40 kilograms, but that is from 2022 funding. 2023, we have 2024 and 2025 funding that has not been spent.
So that was my third question.
And
how
it's on the order.
Doesn't sound like.
It's on the order of about $1.2 million.
Okay,
If I will say at this point, it's not competitive if the projects have a high phosphorus efficiency.
right, if it fits the rules,
Right,
right,
if-
yes, you're fine,
if-
but, got it.
I don't want to overstate this. If you have a good phosphorus efficiency project, they're
yeah,
going
they
through
want it.
pretty quick.
Bottlenecking is getting everything that'll
Yeah.
Okay.
be phosphorus.
If we can get through that project implementation, get the initial forms,
That's the big
the
piece.
biggest issue is getting Karen to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's the aspect of getting the phosphorus reduction number and the cost estimate to determine efficiency, but then there's also all of the things associated with, I want to do this. Well, you have to get DEC approval to do that, and then that can be a very long process.
And who's Karen?
Karen Bates is the watershed planner for, is she?
Basin 5 and Basin 6.
Yeah, or,
So is she DEC or? is
She is
she
DEC,
NRPC?
And she came out to evaluate our site, and the reason I got excited about the Pilots Road site, she said, you have to get a project ID. And
Yeah.
if she says that, that's huge.
yeah, that's something I neglected to mention is that every time that you fill out an application, you have to go to this database run by DEC called the Watershed Projects Database and get an ID number that's approved by DEC. Again, that's something that I do. So if you're like, can I please get a Watershed Project Database ID? I'm happy to do that.
Hope you love your job.
It's nice that I'm getting out and meeting people. It makes it better.
Well, he spends 1.5 years getting trained and then leaves after 2 years.
And what was Karen's title? Watershed?
She's a watershed, I think watershed planner. Yeah.
Watershed planner. This was fascinating.
I'm glad. I was worried that too much of it would be redundant. But
No, it's all good.
good to hear.
We just need to figure, the issue is projects. There's a lot of tedious and there's a lot of, I don't want to say it, complaining about the process and all that kind of stuff. We're lacking projects. We are lacking projects. I'm saying that as the chair of the Basin Water Quality Council. We're lacking projects. We just had a meeting last week, no projects. We need projects.
I think we're getting closer to being able to understand what we need to look for as a board.
And
I know when we first started this, I had no idea what to look for a project.
this whole like funding situation is relatively new too. And I think something that NRPC is trying to do is build the infrastructure to help you say, hey, I'm looking at this and this is gonna be a good project. Like, I'm coming up with the gully flow chart right now to help one determine if the gully that they see can actually be
Flow chart.
funded, yes. So like doing that if towns have a capacity to be working on that with us, I think that would be very helpful and
Do you have any
streamline.
gullies?
Yeah,
Well,
they do out there.
there's gullies, and Danielle, I know you're seeing things. You have to. You're the person going out to properties, whether
Boots
they're
on the ground.
commercial or residential or town. You're seeing stuff. We know you are. Maybe you just don't know it.
I see some things.
And she knows it.
Well, and not to jump too far into this, but I know there are things that people are doing that maybe they shouldn't, but maybe they could apply for funding and they'd be really happy about getting some of that funded instead of doing it this way. They do it with BMPs and it's paid for.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you can interject soon enough, Joe, you already know the project. If we could have injected soon enough, then they probably could have gotten that paid.
What project are you referring to?
Instead of, I'm not gonna say names, instead of getting a $80,000 event.
Yeah.
Hit,
Mhm.
Yep.
Definitely.
they could have gotten, probably, I'm looking at the project, they probably could have gotten 30.
And instead of being a bad experience, it could have been a very
Right.
positive
Right.
experience.
Mhm.
And I think if people know that, I think they'd appreciate that,
Mhm.
and especially if there's money available.
I mean-
Way the first time.
I haven't lived on the lake forever. I've just gone through what my parents have gone through. But everything's changed so much in the last 30 years. And you look at a lot of people, they buy lakefront property and then they want to improve their land. But we don't really have any kind of education for how for them to improve. So a lot of them do it on their own and then they do it the wrong way,
Yeah, and like,
you know, and then how do you fix that?
I know that DEC's, the way the DEC process works is incredibly cumbersome, and I don't know if there's a better way that you could do it, but I will say with all these project categories, they do have very clear things that, at least when it's written down, clear things that can be done that is gonna have a longevity to it that's guaranteed, and you can get funding for it.
And one of the biggest things I see with Vermont is if there was more population, we'd have more permanent positions. Like, you know, everybody in this town is pretty much volunteer.
Right, yeah.
What do we have, Andy, like 190 volunteers?
Something like that.
That's
yeah,
crazy.
Big number.
We have a lot of participation, but nobody really has the time to spend to, you know, Tom does. Tom's doing a great job.
I had one project.
So
Right.
we've got two public events coming up and I'm wondering if we should be soliciting for projects.
I mean, I think the answer is yes, but I'm not. Well, Lakewise is, so we have a Lakewise event coming up. And I mean, you mentioned that as a key event, or an event, not a key, but an event to identifying projects. And Allison clearly uses Lakewise to help identify projects. And she'll state that, she will be like, we want to assess your property, and I think she has changed her message a little bit. It was, we want to assess your property for Lakewise. But I think her message now is we want to assess your property for Lakewise and potential for projects.
That
I
can get
know
funded.
that message
Yeah,
will be
that could all get tied in with it.
And you can get a Lakewise funded through the WISP. This is important to note.
Oh, as an individual?
I'm
I'm confused about that.
I'm a little confused with it. I don't think so, I understand.
I gotta think about that.
Yeah.
So the people that do quiz, Allison has an intern that does quiz, and I seem to have heard that Friends is now certified to do.
Oh, they have the,
They were
assessment
certified,
certification.
they have assessment certification, but I think DEC, here's what I've heard, DEC gave them X amount of dollars. They've maxed out their dollar amount because they're doing 10 Lakewise assessments, and so they don't have any more money to do assessments this year. So everything would have to go through Allison and the intern. You don't do lake-wise assessment.
I don't know.
So the answer is, I think the lake-wise is a good opportunity to the public to say, bunk, and Allison will go through some of the bioengineering stuff. But I think we as a group need to really figure out how to market this. And the before and after pictures are great, and doing visits at sites that have been done are great.
So is that something we wanna plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
So do a site visit for July?
Sure.
So I should reach out to the homeowner and to.
Do you know
book time? Yeah. And book time for the hall.
I wonder if we, I don't know, I think visuals go a long ways for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just wondering. How many?
Yeah, I'm
how
trying to
many
figure out
extra
how to-
Before and after pictures we could get, and if we could get, you know, like proper vegetation pictures, or even proper vegetation in a pot. When they come to the presentation, you know. This is what you should be putting, growing on the lake shore or in between, you know, your pathways, walkways, whatever.
They did a lake-wise at my property, and I've got everything. I've got wetland, shoreland, slope, cleared area, I have everything.
Right.
And it was a great place, and I do not have a lake-wise banner. I haven't gotten it yet, because they won't give it to me. But
Why?
Tom's a bad boy.
the property doesn't, it didn't, I had some flaws.
Okay, I see, I see.
Yeah, but it was a great property to do an event at, and out of that one event, Molly got 10 or 11 lake-wise signups.
Mhm.
But it was a great event to say, yeah, here's a property, there's some good things going on, but there's a bunch of bad things. We got
Right.
mini gully erosion
Right.
and all sorts of stuff.
No.
Yeah. But I think it's, I think it's more than, I mean, it's kind of this year we shifted more towards projects and project identification as a subcommittee, but this feels more like our meat right now.
Yeah. Well, in 2023, we had 4 lake-wise assessments in North
Mhm.
Carolina. And in 2024, we had 23.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. So that was super successful.
Yeah. I mean, with all of this, it's just messaging. This is relatively new. It's incredibly confusing. Like understanding, like even if you don't fully get how phosphorus reduction is calculated, just knowing like, hey, there's a chance that you can get project funded on your property if you have this
You
done.
can even get sample
Yeah.
if you know somebody.
And I mean, yeah, and I'm trying to think, because the presentation you gave was great, but if we're trying to get people to bring projects to us, that would have been like
Yeah.
money from here and money from there and money, like picture shows. Joe,
I'm tactile, I'm sorry.
picture shows.
Yeah.
We'll have to think about that. We might reach out to you. So I mean, we'll sit down, we'll look at the site visit, but I don't have it in my head yet. How do we get pictures in front of everybody? And how do we get Daniela to tell us some of the things she's seen that she probably doesn't want to tell anybody? And that kind of stuff. And we have roughly $7,000 to pay people to come in and listen. So if there's a point where you're like, I can't do this for free, but if you pay me this, I could come in and evaluate. I think we do have some money to do that.
That's committee money or that's money from
It's
the
always
grant?
money,
Grant money.
but the committee's kind of managing it.
Yeah.
We have, every time we want to spend it, we have to go to the select board and say, hey, here's
Yeah.
what we want to spend it on. And Joe raises his hand and everything was good.
Something like that.
Any more questions? We've gone way over time, but we really appreciate.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I mean,
We're, I hope we can find more projects.
Please send the presentation.
I will.
It was excellent. Please send the links to
All the manuals and
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah, I'm
manuals.
happy to do that.
Joe wants
For
to
sure.
read them all.
Give me the expert. At least I don't have to do it. Don't even need me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
This
We've
opportunity.
already done other business.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Hold on. Can we talk about the?
Oh, next week.
logistics For the plan for next week?
Next week.
Yeah.
Which.
It's the 29th. It's
Yeah.
Thursday, the 29th.
Here,
Yeah,
Here, 6 to 8.
right, and we have two speakers.
Allison.
Yeah,
I've seen them. I've seen the exact presentation. They're gonna do, the amount of time and everything is perfect. So Allison will start out with a Lakewise presentation. And then we'll move to Misha. Misha gets tons of questions. I don't know if you've been in Misha's presentations.
I have not. No,
And we just, the only thing I think we have to figure out how to control a little bit is one or two individuals like to take over the permitting. And they just keep pounding because they're angry about something. We just, but we,
who's
so we
gonna
need,
handle AV?
I'll work with Tracy on that because I did it last time.
Great,
So I'll take on the AV with Tracy.
great.
And beyond that, if people show up and do chairs and so on and so forth, I think we agreed we don't need food.
Nope.
It didn't really bring
Right.
anything to the last event.
Yeah.
Other than kind of a distraction.
right.
I'm trying to think what else. That was an event to get set up, but we got it working.
Great.
We set up chairs. Introduced the guests. You and Missy are gonna do promotion.
Yep. Missy hasn't signed up for that, but I'll twist her arm.
Oh, boy.
Are we good?
Yeah,
Thanks, so.
Great. All right. There was a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
second.
Second, all in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thanks, Missy.
Have a great night.
See you, Missy.